Hi, this is Scott Kilos here, 6 Delta Alpha Yankee, and for today's video we're taking a look at the Talkpod A36 Plus. In the last video I did, I mentioned that I had an upcoming review on this radio. I also mentioned that this radio was amongst a handful of radios that I actually didn't intend to do a review on because I didn't like the radios. And I don't like reviewing bad radios. It's a bad look when all you're doing all the time is just bitching about radios and nitpicking, and I don't want to be that guy. But in thinking about it, I consider my motivations, and my motivations were this. I want to talk about radios that are good radios. I want to recommend good pieces of kit, and I want to make sure that people are having, are making truly informed buying decisions. And that's good, and that's altruistic, and that makes sense. But the problem is, just like you can't really tell how much light there is without some darkness to contrast it to, you kind of have to, if you're going to be talking about good radios from time to time, you also, and it's just as important to, rather than point people to good gear, also point people away from bad gear so they don't waste their money. Now, for a lot of radios that are kind of obscure and not terribly popular, it doesn't really matter because the market is sort of spoken on those radios, and for whatever reason, they'll die a natural death all on their own. But in the case of the Talkpod A36, I'm seeing a lot of content going out about this radio, and one could reasonably assume, seeing so much activity on this radio, that hey, this is something worth looking at. Maybe I'll grab one of those. And especially if they've looked at reviews and there's some things about this radio that should be mentioned that aren't, that can further lead people in the direction of making a purchasing mistake. So I thought it was kind of important to get the word out on a couple of things on this radio, and at least someone out there saying, hey, you need to think about this for just a minute. And some guys have done that in their reviews. Admittedly, there's some people, particularly in terms of the spurious emissions problem with this radio. There's a couple of guys that have done some excellent work pointing that out. There's a couple of other things about it that I think should be mentioned, though, that aren't. And I'll get to those as we go through. But and I'll give you one other reason why I was kind of prompted to do this review. I was actually pitched by Talkpod to review a Talkpod A36 a couple of weeks ago. And it was right about the time when I was making these or thinking about this, whether or not I should actually review the thing. And I declined their invitation to review one of their radios since I'd already had one for about a month. But I did respond with some of my issues about the radio itself and the manner in which it was being marketed. And as I predicted to myself, Talkpod never got back to me. So okay, it looks like they're not actually interested in the constructive criticism that they were actually asking for in their pitch letter, but I'm going to give it to them nonetheless, and this is the form I'm going to do it in. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and launch into this. Let me talk real briefly about how I came to acquire this. We purchased this off of Amazon, and from the listing on Amazon, which has since been changed, by the way, what they offered in the listing was a Talkpod A36 Plus ham walkie-talkie. Now, when somebody says a ham walkie-talkie, the assumption is you're getting an amateur radio band specific walkie-talkie. They said it was dual band, so I'm going to assume it's 2 meter, 70 centimeter, VHF, UHF, and they also mentioned it had a 512 memory channel capacity. All right, so that's what I got. I open up the box, and this is what I'm greeted with. The box itself says GMRS portable transceiver, and then it says designed for general mobile radio service operation. It says it on this too. But when you go to the end tag here, right there at the top, it says pretty much what it said on the Amazon radio listing. A36 Plus radio ham walkie-talkie. Now, I can imagine that the reason that their listing got changed is because it's misleading. If you get this, and I'll show you why in a moment, but if you get this and what you get is actually a GMRS radio, if you wanted a ham radio, you're going to send it back to Amazon. They have a pretty good return policy. And I'll tell you something, being an Amazon vendor myself, when your listing is misleading, Amazon catches on to that pretty damn quick, and they will either fix you or fix it. In either case, it's going to get handled. So that's why I think their listing has since been changed. But to verify what I had, I installed the battery and screwed the antenna on. turned the radio on, and I was greeted with this screen. We have an A and a B band, and in there it says GMRS 1 in the A band and the B band. So it looks like a pre-programmed GMRS radio. But having seen a couple of the reviews on this radio where the reviewers got radios that were fully unlocked and would transmit in GMRS and ham, I'm thinking, well, did I get that, or is the thing actually locked out to GMRS only? If it was fully expanded to do GMRS and ham, I guess you could say I did get a ham walkie-talkie that would do GMRS. Not strictly legal as far as the FCC goes, but there's... well, I'm not going to get into that argument. But I thought, well, let's test this. And the way you test this is you want to go switch from memory mode to VFO and punch in a ham radio frequency. Well, that's easier said than done with the Talkpod A36 Plus, because look at the front of the radio and tell me, how do we switch from memory to VFO? I don't know. So one would then, of course, consult the manual, right? Well, the manual is the worst manual I've ever encountered with a radio, ever, hands down. It absolutely takes the prize for being the opposite of informative and just a waste of time and paper. Nowhere in the manual does it tell you at any point anywhere how to switch this radio from memory to VFO. And that's an important thing with a radio, whether it's GMRS or whether it's a ham radio. The ability to switch from memory to VFO is the first step in programming a memory channel. From the front panel. It's a critical frickin' thing. It's like job 2 when you're putting together a manual. But it doesn't show you that. So like any semi-professional radio reviewer, what I did was I just started mashing buttons until something happened. And I lucked upon the menu button, which is the green button. If you long press it, it will take you to VFO. So there's your how to get to VFO on a Talkpod A36 Plus. So when you key down, you get an error. It's not transmitting. So that tells me this radio is locked out to GMRS. However, I had already done my research, and I already knew that about the same time that the A36 Plus hit the streets, so did the cheat codes. And it's pretty well known, and if you don't know it, you're going to know it now. If you hold the PTT down, and you hold the 8 key down, and you turn the radio on, you'll see expand. And that means the radio is now expanded, and it will, if I hit the VFO, now transmit in the ham radio band. Okay, so that's how it becomes a ham radio. So yeah, they sold me a ham radio, but some assembly required, so to speak, and not a whole lot of help there. Now, if you are a person who unfortunately fell for the hype and bought an A36 Plus and you're trying to figure out your radio, I'll give you a recommendation. If you go to the Talkpod blog, they clear up a lot of the things that are missing from the manual in there. Things like how to switch from memory to VFO. They know their manual sucks, and they probably had to respond to enough direct inquiries via email that they've set up this blog as a form of an FAQ to figure out the radio. So if you're looking for more information, go there. It's not hard to find. Just Google it, Talkpod blog, and you'll find a lot of information on the radio. In fact, I think somewhere in there you'll find the expand codes. And if you did happen to expand your radio and you've said, hey, I don't want an expanded radio in my inventory, I want to switch this thing back to GMRS mode only. If you hold down the PTT and you hold down the 2 key and turn the radio on, it moves it back to GMRS mode, and now it will only function as a GMRS radio. So, because whether or not a radio is expanded or not, there's some people that don't have a problem with it. I'm one of those people, and there's some people that do. And if you're a person who's a stickler for the rules, and I can appreciate that, there you go. If you want to just keep it as a GMRS radio moving forward, then fine, go ahead and do that. But yeah, that's kind of disingenuous, kind of slippery, but again, you're going to get used to that if you're going to be messing with the Talkpod A36. Now let me move on to the next issue, and this is sort of where me and the A36 ended. So I go, well, all right, let's go ahead and program this thing up and test it and see what it does. Now, I'll give them credit for another thing. They do provide a programming cable with this. It uses a standard K1 plug, Baofeng type plug. I didn't try a Baofeng programming cable. I just went ahead and used theirs, but it's not a bad programming cable when it comes in the box, along with a cradle charger for the radio and a couple of other widgets. I think it has a lanyard like most of them have that nobody I know uses, but there you go. Some guys do, I guess. But I go to program this up. Now, there's two ways to do this. You can use the Talkpod Factory CPS or Customer Programming Software, or you can use Chirp. The Factory CPS is awful. I didn't expect anything better than what I got. But fortunately, the new version of Chirp, whatever it's called, Chirp New or Chirp Next or whatever, somebody put some work in before this radio came out, because man, that is a fully featured chirp file right there, or whatever they call chirp build. Anything you want to do with this radio in terms of programming it with a computer can be done with chirp. So I recommend you go in that direction. So I start programming. Now I want to take you all the way back to the beginning with the Amazon listing, and they mentioned 512 memory channels. And like I said, this is where me and the Talkpod A36 ended, and I got pissed and I raged quit. And this is the one thing that I don't hear any other reviewers talking about, because they'll be talking about the general specs of the radio, and they just throw out, yeah, it's got 512 memories, and pew, they're on to something else. If somebody did it, I apologize for not having seen your video, but I've looked at enough videos on this, and nobody brings this up. I go to program this, and I'm in Chirp, and I start programming from the first line, and I'm zipping through, and I go, man, I'm going to be able to put a lot of stuff in this radio, so I can at least say that, right? So I get to line 256, and boom, dead end. 256. So I'm thinking, well, maybe they have it broken up into two blocks. I know, for instance, the ICOM ICT10 does that with its CPS. They have channels 0 to 99, and then 100 to 199. And in an A and a B block. I don't know why they do that, but they do. So I thought maybe that's what's going on, because I've heard some references to 256 in the A band and 256 in the B band. Because if you ask Talkpod, hey, you said 512 memories, what's the deal? They say, well, there's 256 memories in the A band and there's 256 memories in the B band. Where's the B band? Where can I program those additional 256 memories in so that I get my full 512? Well, there is no place to program those memories in. This radio has 256 memory slots available to it. That's it. There are not 512 memories on this radio. 256. And to be completely honest with you, for a radio that comes in at this price point with a color display, some issues that I'll get to in a bit, but 256 is fine. You didn't need to do this, but here's what they said. And this is what they tell you. The way where the 512 comes from is you have 256 memories that you can view in the A band, which is this upper block, and you can view those same 256 memories in the B band. So you have 512 memories that you can look at. Well, if you're going to follow that logic, what I'm going to tell you is your radio doesn't have 512 memories. It only has 2, because you can only look at one channel at a time on the A and the B block. So if you're going to follow that logic of what you can see from the A and the B is either 2 channels or just the same 256 if you were scanning. There's not 512 memories. And that is just, and look, if you read their blog, you'll see them talking about this. And it literally is like watching somebody try to nail Jell-O to a wall. The slippery, euphemistic soft language they use is ridiculous. And when somebody does that, and they try to hit you with something that's a little shammy and scammy, what they're telling you by doing that is they're saying to you, to your face, I think you're stupid enough that I can sneak this by you. That is one thing, one of my hot buttons. You start playing like that, it's game over time. Nothing you say moving forward I will believe, listen to, or take with any degree of credibility. And if they were just honest with it, and they said, hey, it's like this. You got 256 on the top, 256 on the bottom. They're the same 256, but it gives you the availability. Even then, there's no way around it. Just say it's 256 and move on. you'll be fine, and it doesn't create this speed bump. It doesn't create this moment of distrust between the customer and the manufacturer. And that's what Talkpod is doing by doing this stuff. And whenever a company is doing this, it is a giant red flag for me. I don't do business, and I'm a businessman. I am half owner of a company that manufactures products and sells people. And this kind of behavior, believe it or not, has kept me from being a rich man. It's the reason I drive a 20-year-old truck. Is because I refuse to play on that level. And I refuse to play with people that play on that level. It's dishonest. And again, it has cost me and my business partner huge amounts of money in cutting ties with people that were shady and disingenuous because we didn't want to be those people too. So I don't do business with companies that do that, and I don't recommend the products of companies that do that. So that's kind of why I stopped with the Talkpod A36. I didn't want to give them any oxygen whatsoever. But what I was faced with is the fact that a lot of people are, and a lot of people are buying this radio thinking it's going to be okay or good to go, and what they're getting is just a lot of nonsense. Now, it's not a completely horrible radio that's not usable, but at the same time, it's not the innovative new product a lot of people make it out to be. About the only thing I can say in the positive on this radio is the display. I like it. But I'm going to be showing you a radio in about a week that's less expensive than this. Hell, it's a $25 radio that has the same display. So it looks like that colored display with a black background is a thing now with these cheap Chinese radios. So you're going to see everybody doing it. So that doesn't make this radio particularly special. It also claims some other things regarding airband. I'm going to tell you, given this antenna, the airband reception on this radio is not good. You can get some airband reception if it's right on top of you. I live, I kid you not, a mile and a half away from an airport, and I can barely hear the air traffic with that antenna. I put other antennas on it. Didn't improve much. It'll get it, but it's not great because you're asking a radio that's basically a chip on a board, cheap Chinese radio with a direct conversion receiver. You're asking that radio to receive both FM and AM because air traffic, you're talking 128 megahertz. You're getting down in the AM band. It's not designed to do that. You can make it, you can get it to squeeze in there, but it's not going to do it very well at all. So if you're looking for an airband radio, there are other ways to go. There's some Yaesu radios out there that are inexpensive enough. Hell, an FT60. Buy an FT60 and call it a day because you want airband, you want all kinds of crazy stuff, you want the best receiver in the world, go that direction. If you really want to start getting into more expansive use of radio, you need to be looking away from the cheap Chinese radios. You need to start saving your money up and buying a decent radio in order to do that. But we're going to continue to see people rolling with the airband and calling that a thing, and it's not real good. This does have, it's hitting all the buttons that everybody's calling for. It's got the USB-C charger, which everyone seems to be you say USB-C charger and you can sell somebody a turd with a PTT button on it, so long as it's got USB-C. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good radio. The PTT is super duper sensitive. The antenna I already sort of alluded to, but it's not good. The reception on this radio is not good. The quality of the speaker is not terrific. It's very generic. The belt clip is awful, but it does have the cool little detach feature, which that seems to be a new thing now. So you can unclip it like the iComs, and all right, I guess, but it's not a particularly good belt clip to begin with. Like I say, a lot of sideways displacement. It's very flimsy, and it does look like it's going to snap pretty quick. The battery is suspiciously light. I'm holding this in my hand, and it really feels like there's nothing inside of this case. I know there's a battery in there. The damn radio works. I don't know what they're doing with this. Now, what do they say it is? They say it's a 1500 milliamp battery, which isn't terribly large. They do sell an expanded battery for this, But again, that's putting lipstick on a pig, so I don't know if we necessarily want to do that. Did I mention the PTT being very sensitive? If I didn't, I'll mention it again. You barely bump this thing and it will transmit. It does have side keys. They're probably programmable. I couldn't tell you what they're programmable to do because the manual doesn't tell you that either. The FP, or front panel, of course, we know this is a complete mystery that you're going to have to figure out. Although you can switch from the A to the B band, they do give you that. You do have a menu key, and you do have a menu that does have all of the functions you're going to need to do programming, and then you've got an exit key, channel up and down, typical cover with a typical K1 type plug here. All right, and that's kind of about it, really. It's again, not terrific. Now I'm going to talk about the very last thing on this. This is actually going to cover information I've received from other reviews. I don't have a commercial grade service monitor or spectrum analyzer, so I can't show you this for myself, but I will report that what I have seen other people that do have that equipment show is that this thing horribly fails when it comes to spurious emissions, which is not a surprise for a cheap Chinese radio. Most of the Baofangs don't pass the test either, but it's something that you need to know. Yes, it's a GMRS radio that can be used for ham, but if you're using it for ham, the chances are pretty good that you're kicking out spurious emissions that are loud enough to hear well up the frequency spectrum in areas where maybe you don't want people to be hearing your transmissions, or maybe they don't want to be hearing your transmissions. That's something to be aware of. But overall, top to bottom, side to side, I can't in good conscience recommend the A36 Plus to anyone. It's a flawed radio, and it's a radio that's being marketed by people that engage in disingenuous and dishonest business practices. So with that, look, if there it is. I'll add one last thing when we're talking about where it really sank home the dishonest and disingenuous business practices. If you look up the FCC ID on this radio, because as part of the solving the mystery on whether or not this is a ham radio, I looked up that FCC ID number, which is the right here, 280QZ GMRS1. And I wanted to see what did Talkpod tell the FCC they were doing. And just to let you know, and you can look it up yourself on the FCC website, they said this is a radio intended and designed for the GMRS band. They also attest that the radio cannot be modified by the end user for expanded transmit via the use of software. Now, of course, if you're using your fingers, they may be buttery soft, but they're not software. So just using your fingers to press the PTT and the 8 obviously expands the radio. So yeah, slippery, disingenuous. Oh well. If I didn't mention that, I might have mentioned that earlier. Not totally sure. Getting to the point where I'm wrapping this up. But with that, I'll bring this to an end and just say, look, my recommendation is avoid the A36 Plus. There are a lot of other radios within the same price point that are better than this all day long. There's nothing particularly special or innovative about this radio. Even the styling is kind of the look doesn't appeal to me at all. It's just kind of bland, and there you go. So A36 Plus, thumbs down. You can do better. And with that, I will bring this to an end. But my next video, I am going to be talking about something pretty darn cool. And for the next few videos, you're going to see some pretty cool radios. And I'm going to actually kick off a couple of operator series. I still need to wind up the VX6 operator series, but I've got a couple of others that I'm kicking into the hopper that people have been asking for. So that's about it. I'm going to go ahead and bring it to a close at this point. Thank you for watching and or listening. This is Scott, Kilo Sierra 6, Delta Alpha Yankee from Southwest Visalia, California. Have a wonderful day.